Ever since Avengers Endgame, Disney Marvel's entire MCU has been mainly a series of diminishing returns with a few nostalgic anomalies along the way. At least part of the reason for why this franchise is doing so poorly these days has to be because of all of its agenda peddling and modern day messaging in recent years, and some might say that there's also some kind of superhero fatigue, with people just being tired of the genre in general. And while both of these are true to an extent, another big issue here, specifically with the MCU, is that since Avengers Endgame, it also seems like Marvel president Kevin Feige has really lost his way creatively too. Back in the day, when he was putting together the Infinity Saga for an on-screen adaptation, he was surrounded by people like Jon Favreau, Joss Whedon, and James Gunn, who helped him achieve that goal. But these days, Marvel mainly attracts second-rate talent that aren't able to make crowd-pleasing blockbusters, and when I heard that Kevin Feige was introducing a new Fantastic Four team into his MCU, I already had a bad feeling about it, especially when it was going to be directed by Matt Shakman, a guy whose claim to fame is that he directed a few episodes of WandaVision, a show which started off interesting and then just went off a cliff.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
And in the years leading up to the Fantastic Four's release, between the casting announcements, between the trailers and the interviews, I kept getting this feeling that the movie is going to be a disappointment. Now, just to be clear, I don't go into movies wanting them to be bad. In fact, I read Fantastic Four comics as a kid, and they are the first family of Marvel, so I really did hope that somebody would do them justice. We've had a number of different cinematic versions of the Fantastic Four over the years, and while I liked certain things about some of those, it certainly felt like there was room for a really good adaptation. Now in this video, I'm going to be discussing the general plot of the movie. I won't spoil anything beyond what we've already seen in trailers, which is a lot, and marketing, which is also a lot. But before we begin, if you can take a second to like and subscribe, it would really help my channel. Any type of support an independent reviewer like myself could get these days would be greatly appreciated.
Do it.
Fantastic Four starts off on an alternate Earth known as 828, which is why everything that we see in it kind of looks like a retro future. So it's not actually the main universe for the MCU, and as opposed to previous versions of Fantastic Four, this one doesn't really show us how they became superheroes. There's just some kind of exposition dump with some clips that we see on a TV explaining that they gained their abilities from being exposed to a cosmic ray on a space flight. It also shows them in action and establishes that they're already known in their world and respected. And then one day suddenly, after they find out that Sue is pregnant, a female Silver Surfer arrives and tells planet Earth that Galactus is coming and that he's a cosmic being that consumes planets, and basically Earth is going to be destroyed. And after this warning, the team does some research and ultimately they decide to head out into space, try to find Galactus, and try to negotiate with him to save Earth. And since Sue Storm is pregnant, Galactus is willing to spare Earth if she gives her son to him. And of course they refuse, and then the Fantastic Four go back to Earth, and obviously at the end there's a big showdown, and the movie pretty much concludes in exactly the way you'd think it would. Now, as I've said, there were adaptations of Fantastic Four in the past. The Roger Corman version, which was mainly just made to obtain rights in a very cheap way, it really did look cheap, but I still think, in spite of that, it did have some heart, and you could feel that the people involved in it were genuinely excited to be there, which is at least something. Then you had the Jessica Alba versions, which had their own issues, but at the same time, I did like the casting of all four characters, especially Reed Richards. And whatever flaws those movies had, there was an element of fun to them, which I also liked. Then we had Fan4stick, which obviously was an absolute disaster. And if I had to describe what I thought about this new Fantastic Four, I'd basically say that it was boring and lackluster, to an extent that while I was sitting in the theater, somewhere around the halfway point, I legitimately felt like going to sleep. And that's really not the kind of feeling you're supposed to get in a Fantastic Four movie. And while I was watching it, I was trying to figure out what wasn't working for me, and the number one thing that I have to say is probably the casting, because Pedro Pascal is the worst casting ever for Reed Richards in the history of Fantastic Four casting. I never believed for 1 second that this guy is who he says he is. Instead of being this very kind of clever and sharp guy, the whole movie just feels like a complete imposter. Maybe part of that is also the screenplay that writes him out to be kind of a dum-dum to begin with, but Pedro Pascal himself really isn't charismatic or sweeping enough here to make me change my mind about it. And with all due respect, I'm not saying that Vanessa Kirby is a bad actress, but she doesn't convince me as Sue Storm either. I don't like her in this role at all. If I have to point out one cast member that maybe was passable, it's Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, but while he wasn't terrible, the overall cast here does not hold a candle to the Jessica Alba cast. Not by a long shot. And in fact, I actually think that if this was in an alternate universe anyways, Kevin Feige should have just made a third movie with the original Fantastic Four cast, make it good, and have them introduce an older son of theirs, Franklin, which maybe then Feige could have imported into his own MCU. That would have been way cooler. And the fact that Ioan Gruffudd and Jessica Alba are so close in their age to Vanessa Kirby and Pedro Pascal makes the fact that Feige didn't use them even more baffling. And you know, I've seen some reviews and they're saying it's such a great tribute to Jack Kirby and the visuals are so nice and it's retro future, but you know what? I don't care about any of that. If the movie is miscast and the screenplay is dull and the dialogue is boring and everything just kind of drags along, then there's nothing really good for me to say about it. And while I know that maybe we've seen in other movies how they got their powers, I would have liked to have seen that again. I didn't like seeing it as an exposition dump, because they expect you to care about these characters from the get-go, and you're not invested in them at all, you just don't care what they're even doing. And for some reason, there's violins playing in the movie every second. Maybe the guy doing the score just thought that it was boring, so he kept having people play violins, but it just comes out like The Young and the Restless, which makes this even worse to watch. The only thing that I kind of liked about the movie is that I liked seeing Galactus look like Galactus. In the past, when we saw him in 2007, he looked like a collection of farts, but now he actually looked menacing. But that's not enough for me to say that I like a movie. I just need much more than that. And surprisingly, while people have said that this is better than Thunderbolts and better than Superman, two movies that certainly had their issues, I would say that it's less than those movies. In fact, the only superhero movie that I've seen this year that was worse than Fantastic Four was probably Captain Falcon Strange New World. And that's really, really not a good place for you to be. And considering that this was supposed to be Kevin Feige turning a new leaf or something like that, I really feel like this movie doesn't deliver. I would even say that maybe this is a sign that after the upcoming Avengers movie, maybe Kevin Feige should think about retiring, and maybe even Disney giving a 5-year break to this franchise in general, because I feel like it's going in the wrong direction, and Fantastic Four has not changed my opinion. In terms of box office, I don't think this is going to do all that great. I think this is probably going to make less than Superman and less than Jurassic World this summer, and if I myself had to give it a score where anything below a 60 is considered a failure, I suppose I would give it a 55 out of 100. It has some aspects of it that show that it's a professional production, but not enough for me to even give it a passing grade because of how bored I was while I was watching it. And if you enjoy getting honest reviews from an independent reviewer like myself, please make sure to like and subscribe. As I said, anything you could do to help support my channel would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.